drug addiction is just devastating. It's such a toxic phenomenon that really destroys a whole family in terms of the emotional, financial, relational devastation that it causes to a family without an end in sight. That's the worst part. I think if you take any other type of an illness, there is at least some kind of a better prognosis, some kind of a prediction around when hopefully this illness will end. Even with cancer, even with HIV, if you will, which is no longer a terminal illness, and cancer doesn't have to be terminal illness based on the acuity of it, if you will. And but with addiction, it hits families from nowhere. It comes out of the blue. Nobody really is capable of picking up on it. So there is almost that prodromal phases, hidden phase, where people are in complete denial, at times willingly, if you will, intentionally, at times even unknowingly, hoping it would be something else rather than addiction to and dependence on drugs. And who knows how long that takes. I've seen families who come after 5 years and just realizing that this is what they're dealing with, whereas they know the first signs started 5 years ago. But for 5 years, for example, this is an example I'm throwing out there, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, they have been going blind. They have had no clue. They have been in dark about this devastating event that has been agonizing them on a daily basis. And it is really heart-wrenching, because if you think about the pain that the family members, and including the person who is struggling with addiction, has experienced on a daily basis, not knowing what's happening to them. And then finally they get to a stage or phase of more or less having to acknowledge that there is a major issue around substances, right? It could be dealing with substances, like a drug dealer. It could be using and then abusing and then becoming dependent on it. It could, and then again, like we have discussed this before, it really depends on the extent to which the drug have made their impact. Differs from person to person. A family member could come in with a lot of health, physiological, biological, injuries, if you will, out of prolonged drug use. Some people may be more resilient in terms of biologically, but they have had psychological damage. Some others may have had more of a relational damage, meaning basically the family is torn apart and they don't see eye to eye. They are full of resentment and hurt feelings and pain against one another. There have been histories of betrayal and theft and basically damage on a daily basis to their psyche, to their identity, to their trust, and it gets to a person's core values. They start questioning themselves, questioning their identity, questioning the identity of their family, of their individual, of relationship, even to the point where they become again quite hopeless and feel helpless and paralyzed against this illness, against this more or less paralyzing fate at times. They may look at it as such, and it doesn't have to. That's the real sadness, is that just because they didn't know what has affected them and they haven't sought the right remedy for it, they have suffered for nothing, more or less. They have suffered so many years, whereas all these years were not necessarily, they were necessary. They could have accelerated through a remedy by researching, by reaching out, by going to programs that would help themselves and their family. So the impact is huge. It's just like toxin that is not tangible. It doesn't have an odor. It doesn't have a color. It just hits them, and they have no clue what hit them. It takes a long time to discover that, and then it takes a long time to recover, because it's not only the person who is struggling with addiction that needs to recover, that needs to go through a recovery program, but the entire family. Because more or less, addiction simply highlights, if you will, the underlying conditions in terms of human connection, in terms of attachment injuries, in terms of emotional dysregulation, in terms of communication skills, interpersonal effectiveness, interpersonal relatedness, and basically dysfunctions in those areas. And at times, maybe dysfunction is a very harsh word, but more or less deficits, weaknesses in those areas that have maintained the problem. They have maintained the denial toward the use or abuse. They have maintained the enabling processes, the codependencies of the family members that have kept the situation the way it was for many, many years. And ultimately, recovery of the family would include everyone work together on dissecting this complex phenomena, understanding where they are, how, if anything, they are contributing to this issue, contributing to the problem. Kind of seeing their roles, because it has really nothing to do with intentions. People can have wonderful intentions and still contribute to the problem. So that's what recovery is about, is developing insight into those underlying dynamics that maintain the problem, that are beyond just a, let's say, intelligent review of the problem. Many intelligent people are struggling with that issue. It has not, it has no direct cause and effect, if you will, between a lack of intelligence and addiction, or presence of intelligence and addiction. So it's not just one thing that we look at. It's not just how smart a person is, if they can detect it or not. It is the entire system that needs healing. And a family is a system. This is a family system, and they are impacted by this addiction. It's like basically like an acidic, if you will, illness, psychological illness that is corrosive and eats away at the fabrics of the entire family, to a point where the family becomes debilitated. They become paralyzed toward the illness. And that's what we are here to heal. We are here to have some anti-corrosive material that we can introduce and gradually strengthen those hurt relationships and those resentful stances toward each other, and bring the family members back together, but in a non-enabling, non-codependent, and a very healthy way of communicating their needs, their desires, their expectations, their abilities, and more or less wishes, if you will, and where they can come together again in a very functional way to repair the underlying condition and feel good as a family again.